welcome. All right, well, good afternoon. That's what time it is. Things get hectic and we at least time to track of time. You can call me Coach Carla. Okay, I'm Coach Carla. I am a relationship coach, relationship and divorce recovery. Hopefully we don't have to deal with divorce. I mean, hopefully you're young enough that we're not dealing with that yet. But who knows? I got married at 19, so I had been there, done that at your age probably. So, but I do domestic violence awareness trainings because I survived domestic violence. And I was in an abusive marriage for 15 years, in a relationship for 17 years. And whenever I finally got out of that and got myself safe and got my 2 children safe, I started doing awareness advocacy because I didn't know anything about domestic violence. I wasn't raised in that type of environment growing up. It wasn't a part of my home life. And so that was something that was really out of the norm for me. I thought, I came from a good, I wasn't what I thought domestic violence looked like. And so I was like, well, I came from a good home and I'm educated and I've got a career and all of these things. So like, how in the world did this happen to me? So then I got thinking, well, if it happened to me, then it's happening to other people and they don't know what's happening to them either. So I co-founded a task force with Albion Fellows Bacon Center for Warwick County called Warwick County Voices for Change, where we do, it's a task force for domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. So I became a huge advocate, and I also work part-time at the Parenting Time Center, which is a nonprofit organization that I myself had to use along with my children for we do supervised visitations, safe exchanges, cooperative parenting classes, and nurturing parenting classes. And along that, I am a relationship and divorce recovery coach. So I have just a few irons in the fire. So as people who work very closely with your clientele. So I was talking about you and bartenders are going to be people who see people regularly. They're going to divulge information to you that they would not normally just divulge to ordinary people. People are very dedicated to their hairstylist. So once they get you and are in with you and you earn their trust, their crown is precious to them. And so you are going to be somebody that they trust and they are going to be seeing on a regular basis. And while they're in that chair, you're going to be up close and personal. You're going to be around their neck and their ears, and you're going to be able to see things that the average person on the street isn't going to be able to see. You're also going to start hearing, they're going to start talking about their lives. And they're going to be people that you see every month, every couple of months. You're going to see them on a regular basis, and these are going to be people you're going to be establishing relationships with. And you're probably going to start hearing some stories. And over time, you might start hearing repeated stories over and over, or maybe they get a little more detailed and things like that. So I want to give you an idea as to what to listen for, but even more, not more important, but along with that, how can you then offer support to them as you start having little light bulb moments like, oh, I think this might be a little bit more than just they had an argument, okay? And feel free to ask questions along the way. I taught middle school for 17 years, so I'm used to questions, used to hands going up a lot. So I welcome questions. That's fine. Oh, that is not what I need to do, though. Okay. Ta-da. All right, so are you concerned that someone you care about is experiencing abuse? Maybe you've noticed some of the warning signs, which include maybe you start hearing stories about how their partner speaks to them. So their partner puts them down in front of other people. They are constantly worried about making their partner angry. So maybe while they're sitting in your chair, their phone is getting blown up with text messages. Like, where are you? When are you going to be done? Why do you know? I didn't share your location. Are you really at getting your hair done? Why is this taking so long? Those types of things. I personally recall being getting a pedicure, and I was not home when he thought I needed to be home because the salon was running behind, and I had been sitting in a chair with my feet in the water for about a half an hour, and it hadn't gotten to me yet. And he starts blowing up my phone, and I had to be like, I'm sorry, I have to leave. And I had to get up and walk out without my pedicure because it was taking longer than what he decided it needed to take. They make excuses for their partner's behavior. The Gabby Petito that is in the news, everywhere. I didn't watch all the video. It's still triggering. I'm 12 years out, but seeing stuff still have triggers. So I protect myself. I don't have to know all the details of everything anymore. But one of the things that was talking about on the video was that she was making excuses for his behavior as to why he was so angry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have done this. He wouldn't be angry if I hadn't fill in the blank. And so they make excuses for their partner's behavior. Their partner is extremely jealous or possessive. And you may even you might have a couple of different extremes. You've got people who their partner does not want them getting their hair done, colored, nails. They don't want them to be fixing themselves up because then they're jealous and they feel like, well, who are you doing this for? I remember whenever I started curling my eyelashes, and my ex was like, well, who are you doing that for? You didn't curl your eyelashes before. Why are you curling your eyelashes now? So they literally, and so now with lash extensions and everything now, it seems so simple, but that could actually be something that sparks an argument in their relationship. Or it may be the other end is that they have to keep a certain appearance, and they are wanting them to, and maybe even to the extreme beyond what they really want. They have unexplained marks or injuries, and they've stopped spending time with their friends and family. So one of the very first things that an abuser starts doing is isolating you from your friends and from your family. So your families become an issue. Your friends become a problem. You don't need to be hanging out with so-and-so because she's a bad influence. You don't need to be spending time with your family. They don't like me. They're turning you against me. So they will try to isolate you to keep you from spending time with friends and family. They are depressed or anxious, or you notice changes in their personality. So, as you might have noticed, I'm a naturally kind of outgoing, bubbly kind of person. But, I don't know that I would ever say that I went through a depression, but I certainly had to tone myself down. Or I would not feel, bubbly or outgoing because of everything that was going on in my home life. So you might see a change in their personality. So, if they are experiencing abuse is always, no exceptions, about power and control. One of the most important ways you can help someone in an abusive relationship is to consider how you might empower them to make their own decisions. So, ways to offer support. Does anybody have any questions as far as what are some things to be listening for? Again, before we move on? Okay, because this is where you're really going to come into play and play an important role in your client's life. Is because, so maybe you've heard, some of those warning signs, you start hearing what they're saying. Now you're going to be in that support role. How can you support them? Acknowledge that they are in a very scary and difficult situation. Be supportive and listen. know that the abuse is not their fault. You're going to hear things like, I knew I shouldn't have done this, because when I do this, then he reacts like that, or she reacts like this. And so they are going to take on that victim blaming, themselves. So let them know that the abuse is not their fault. No one ever deserves abuse. No one's ever, you're never going to be like, oh, well, yeah, you deserved that. You deserve them talking to you like that. You deserve them hitting you. You deserve them locking you out of the car and not letting you in. No one deserves that. Reassure them that they are not alone and that there is help and support for them. What they need most is someone who will believe and listen. So if you follow any social media campaigns in regards to like abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, anything like that, you know that one of the key messages is if someone tells you that they are being abused, that they have been sexually assaulted, if they are being trafficked in any way, that you say to them that you believe them. Not just say it, but believe them. Because statistically, false reporting, the amount of reports that are false is less than 8%. Okay? So 92% of those who report sexual assault, abuse, something of that nature, 92% of what gets reported. Now, the percentage of what actually gets reported is extremely low. So that 92% of what does get reported is not false. It is true. So, yeah, is there that 8%? Sure, there's 8%. But is that the majority? Not by a long shot. Be non-judgmental. Self-explanatory. Respect their decision. So, because there are many reasons that victims stay in an abusive relationship. The easy answer is, or the easy question rather is, well, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just leave? Well, there's all kinds of factors as to why they don't leave. First of all, I'm going to be using some terms that you guys are a very educated bunch. I mean, like, you guys are like in the know, so these probably aren't terms that you don't know. But gaslighting. How many of you have ever heard the term gaslighting? Okay, so most of you have heard it. So they've been victims of gaslighting. They don't even know what the truth is anymore. Okay? They don't know what to believe in their own head, because gaslighting is a thing. It's a bad thing. And so you're questioning, like, am I crazy? Do the things that I think are wrong, are they really wrong? And what people who gaslight you do is they convince you that what you know to be true is not true. And they'll go so far as to say, well, I never did that. And you're like, but I have the text message. I never said that. But it's right here. It didn't happen. And you're like, but I have the recording, I have the text message, I have the DM. You said it, you did it. No, I didn't. And that's their new truth. Now you're just crazy, no matter what. So gaslighting is a real thing. Financial reasons. Where are they going to go? A lot of times whenever I say they isolate you from friends and family, they've got you to the point where you're cut off. So where are you going to go? And a lot of times they want to keep you dependent upon them financially. So that if you wanted to leave, what are your options? How are you going to support yourself? Where are you going to go? Who are you going to stay with? So there are all kinds of reasons as to why. Whenever I was in it, I was married and had 2 kids. So my questions were, if this is the way he treats me and he loves me, what is he going to do to me when he hates me? Because this is how he treats me when he loves me. I don't want to know what hate looks like. I had 2 kids. So, court systems are tricky. It doesn't always go the way that you want it to go. So, I have 2 kids. My question is, if I leave him, first of all, do I get to keep my kids? Second of all, what happens if he gets standard visitation? So my kids are going to be alone with him 1 night a week and every other weekend. If I stay in this relationship, at least I'm with my kids 24/7. And I have the ability to protect them. When they're with him and they're in his custody, I don't have options. I don't have control over that. So then what happens? I tell you what happens. I stayed in a custody battle for 4 years. That's what happened. Trying to get the abuse against my children and myself stopped for 4 years. So there's all kinds of reasons. The other thing is that whenever you first leave your abuser, that is the highest point of, what's the word I'm looking for? Contention, volatile, homicide. If they weren't mad before, they're mad now. Because why? Abuse is all about 2 things. What is it about? Control. Power and control. You leave. What do they feel like they're losing? Power and control. Okay. So, your biggest risk of physical harm is when you leave. And you know that. In the back, whether you know it, you know it. In the back of your mind. They may leave and return to the relationship many times. Okay, so this is where they're going to be in your chair. They're going to come month after month, and you're going to start hearing repeated stories. And they're going to, 1 month they're in your chair, and I'm done with him. I'm leaving. I'm out. I'm leaving. And the next month you're expecting to come back in here like, so, where'd you get your new apartment? And what's going on? And you're like, oh, well, he said he was sorry, and he's never going to do it again, or she was there, I use he, but you can use she, they, fill in the blank, just for storytelling purposes, I'm saying he. On average, a victim leaves their abuser 8 times. 8 times before they leave for good, if they ever leave. So more than likely, you're going to hear those stories over and over and over again, and you're going to be thinking, why don't you just leave? But you've got gaslighting, you've got trauma bonding. That's a real thing. Having a trauma bond with someone, that is a real thing. You have all these different things. And so what happens is that they leave on average 8 times. So if you're a family member or you're a close friend of this person and they have said they were leaving and gone back 8 times or more, because 8's the average, you as their friend or family member, what do you think you're thinking and feeling?
Frustrated.
Frustrated. You're feeling frustrated. Do you believe them by time 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8? Do you believe that they're actually going to do anything about it? No. So like the first time they come to you, you're like, I'm there for you. What do we need to do? I'll come get your clothes. We're going to pack up my car. We're going to go. Okay, so that's the first time. And then maybe they come to your house, maybe they just stay the night, maybe they stay a week, and then they go back. Well, you're frustrated. Okay, so they go back. Second time. Okay, we're going to do it this time. Third time. Are you really, is it, come on. Because you, as their friend, family member, or whatever, you're getting emotionally involved in this thing. Well, by time 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, you're like, you're not going to do nothing about it, so I'm not getting involved, which is understandable. But just keep in mind that they are working through the process. So they may leave and return many, many times. Do not criticize their decision or guilt them. If they are staying, it may not be a reason that you agree with. It may not be a reason that they agree with. It may just be what they feel is their only option. So, don't criticize their decision or guilt them. They need your support even more during these times. So, if they end the relationship, continue to be supportive. Even though the relationship was abusive, they may still feel sad and lonely once it's over and will especially need your support during this time. Okay, so just because they have left or they've ended the relationship does not mean that they are open to you talking smack about their ex. Because they still have feelings for them, whether they should or should not. They still have those feelings for them. So, talking about that person, they're still going to feel sad. They're still going to be lonely. So let me explain a little bit about the cycle of abuse. So there's a cycle to it that repeats over and over again. And so in the beginning of the relationship, of an abusive relationship, it is called the honeymoon phase. And that is where love bombing occurs, and you're the greatest thing that ever was, and you're so beautiful, and you're so smart, you're so wonderful, and you're so talented, they couldn't live without you, flowers, gifts, dates, trips, whatever. And this may last for months. Okay, so you have the honeymoon phase. And then you start having some little rumbling. And this is the tension building phase. And you may feel like you're having to walk on eggshells. You feel like there's something going on underneath, but you're not quite for sure what is going to be the tipping point, what's going to make it blow up. So you've got that tension building phase, and then you have the explosion, and then you got maybe knockdown, drag out fight, whatever, maybe they're punching holes in the wall, throwing things, locking you out, whatever. You got a big blow up. But guess what comes after that? The honeymoon phase. All over again. And all over again. I'm so sorry. I won't do it again. Please don't leave me. I made a mistake. Here's flowers. Here's jewelry. Let's go on a date. Whatever. So you've got the honeymoon phase. And then, here we go again. Here we walking on eggshells. We can feel the tension building, and we know what's coming. But there is the honeymoon phase that keeps running around enough that the thing about abusive relationships is they're not all bad all the time. If they were all bad all the time, would the victim stay as long as they do? No. There's enough good that they cling on to those good moments, those fun times, that happy, those things, those good experiences. They hang on to that, and especially since that's how the relationship started. It started in this, mountaintop, rainbows, butterflies, you're the greatest thing that ever was stage. So you have this feeling, you think that is your normal. And that as the tension building and the explosions and stuff happen, you're still thinking, oh, we're going to get back to here. We're going to get back to that. And you have enough glimpses of that you still continue to cling on. That it can be like that all the time again. But it doesn't. It doesn't go back to that. It doesn't stay there. And the majority of your time, you're staying in that tension building phase and explosion phase, but you're clinging on to that honeymoon, those good times, thinking if I just hang in there long enough, that it'll be like this again, because it was before. So And they still have those feelings too. They're still remembering those feelings. And even if they've cut it off and they've moved on, they still, somewhere in the back of their mind, probably still have some fond memories of this person and that relationship. So encourage them to participate in activities outside of the relationship with friends and family. But, let me say this. If they are fresh out of an abusive relationship, please do not encourage them to immediately get into another relationship. This whole, the best way to get over one person is to get under the next, is not a good philosophy. Okay? I know I'm not the first person who's ever said that. Maybe here. But that's a horrible philosophy. Do not do that, because that just compounds. You're so vulnerable. They're so vulnerable, and to do that is really, it really messes with their mind, because it could be one more person that they feel rejected by. So encourage them to be relationship free for a while. Support is critical. The more they feel supported by the people who care for them, the easier it will be for them to take necessary steps to get away and stay away from their abusive partner. So, encourage them to develop a safety plan. Leaving an abusive relationship requires a plan. I mean, you can't just pick up and leave, but there's usually a lot of planning that needs to go into it. Because just picking up and leaving a lot of times leads to them just going right back again. So encourage them to develop a safety plan, whether they are choosing to stay, preparing to stay, or have already left. It is important for them to have a safety plan. And you can find information about safety planning and all things about warning signs, red flags, everything that you need or someone that you love that's in an abusive relationship needs, you can find at thehotline.org. Thehotline.org. This is the National Domestic Violence Hotline website, thehotline.org. It has a wealth of information. It even has it broken down so like it has different categories like communication, equality, and things like that. And so it has different categories of what is a relationship, and it'll say, this is healthy, and it's in the green column. Then they have the yellow column, like, this is unhealthy. And then they have the red column, this is abusive. And most of the time we underestimate what falls into the abusive category. We are lenient with ourselves and our partner, and we think that it's just unhealthy. And it's a real eye-opener when you get on there and go, oh, that's not just unhealthy, that's actually considered abusive. Encourage them to talk with people who can provide help and guidance. So local resources are Albion Fellows Bacon Center. Now, how many of you have heard of Albion Fellows Bacon Center? Okay, so Albion Fellows Bacon is who it's named after. They don't serve bacon. It's not a bacon center. I know, it's very disappointing. But they are a wonderful, wonderful resource. Albion Fellows Bacon Center. They are so much more, most people just think of them as a shelter. They are so much more than a shelter. So they are a shelter, but they're more than that. They have advocates. So that's where I went. So when I showed up on my parents' doorstep and I said, okay, I'm ready. My dad drove me to Albion Fellows Bacon Center. I need to say it different. I say it as if it's a bacon center. It's not a bacon center. But he drove me. We met with an advocate. She walked me through an exit plan, and she helped me fill out the paperwork for a protective order. So how to fill that out, how to get that submitted to the court system, and then I started implementing that exit plan. They started telling me what I needed to do. And so I followed their plan, and I never looked back. And they've been supportive of me to this very day. Even working with me to co-found a task force for Warwick County because they didn't have one anymore. So Albion Fellows Bacon Center is a phenomenal resource. The YWCA, we often think about the YMCA. The YWCA is a wonderful local resource, and Holly's House. Holly's House is more specifically for sexual assault. So Albion Fellows Bacon Center would be more for domestic, if you're experiencing domestic violence, YWCA domestic violence, drug, if you have maybe some drug issues there that are contributing to the domestic violence, and then Holly's House is more specifically geared towards sexual assault. Okay? The National Domestic Violence Hotline, again, is thehotline.org. Okay, remember, you cannot rescue them as much as you want to. You can't rescue them. They have to be the one. It's just like forcing someone to go to rehab who is not ready and doesn't want to go to rehab. What do? They may go, but then they check themselves out, or they relapse over and over again. And so you can't do that for them. They have to be the one who makes that decision. It's important to support them no matter what they decide and help them to find a way to safety and peace. Okay, so as far as the presentation, that is all I've got for that. But I would love to hear your question. I'm sure that this has posed a few questions, and maybe you're thinking about, okay, so what if I've got someone in my chair, or maybe, statistically speaking, 1 in 4 women have or will experience physical violence, okay? But when we're talking about domestic violence, we're not talking about just physical violence. We're talking about emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse, sexual abuse. So there are all kinds of different forms of abuse that fall under the category of domestic violence, not just physical abuse. But 1 in 4 women will experience, and 1 in 7 men will experience physical violence against them in their lifetime. So, taking a look around the room, we've got more than 4 in here, which means several of you have either experienced some form of domestic violence already in your life, have witnessed it within your family, or will experience it. But hopefully with being educated, we're dropping that statistic. So, statistically speaking, some of you have some experience with this and may, or have friends that are going through it, or family members, and I'm guessing you might have some questions if you are willing to ask. Yeah.
Does domestic abuse strictly mean a romantic relationship, or can it be like a parent?
It could be a parent.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. So domestic violence is not, so my children experienced domestic abuse. Domestic means within households and people. Yeah. So friends, and it can be within friendships too. You can have an abusive relationship with someone who's a friend, quote unquote friend. I wouldn't call them, but you know what I'm saying. So yes, definitely within families. Yeah. Yes.
So how do you decide, it's not my decision tonight,
Yeah.
which one is the abuser? Because I have a family member who, he does things that are not appropriate, like quitting a job and not telling her when they have 3 weeks of support and stuff like that. But then she also does crazy stuff that, both of them are on the list of what to look for.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, the end result is they just don't need to be together. But it's one thing I have learned: you don't talk smack about the other one for any reason, because then the next week you're gonna love them, and you're the devil because you still don't like them anymore.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But it's so hard for me with these two individuals because they just both do so much to each other.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if it's like he's done all this stuff and she's now triggered by it, but like she has the jealousy big time. And you know, he doesn't like her. She worked at my business, and just working one day a week was too much because she wasn't there to do what he needed done for the kids and him, yada yada.
So it sounds like they have a codependent relationship, and they are functioning in dysfunction. Okay. So they're probably two very unhealthy people who have gotten into relationship with each other. And it's not always an either or. You may have two very dysfunctional people who have gotten together and now are codependent upon each other. And it is that vicious cycle of doing or retaliating and back and forth. So you don't have to pick a side. I mean, they can both be abusive. I would just say if you have one of them who does decide that they want to get, and when you said don't about the talking smack, it is, especially if you're in families, it's kind of like, I can, with my situation, it's like my ex and his family, they could all be horrific to each other, talk terrible about each other, be abusive to each other, but if you dare said anything, like nobody can hurt my family but me, is what the situation was. They could all destroy each other. But if you said anything about it, no. That's my brother. That's my mom. Well, you were just saying, whatever. So they can destroy each other, but you can't say anything about it. Yeah. So you can just,
I would generally just offer support.
Yeah.
I'm like, you need a break from the kids, things are too rough, just bring the kids back, go in the pool. Not, it's not a big call. But whatever, it's not a big deal, or if you just need a place to get away for a couple of days, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But I try not to push in either direction really, because
it won't do any good.
Yeah.
So just be supportive, and if one of them decides to make a decision to get out of the relationship and get the help that they need to not be like that anymore, then just be supportive of that situation. But you need to set a boundary for yourself to not get sucked into the drama. You're welcome. Yes.
Do you have any tips on how to help support maybe like a significant other that has been through those types of relationships?
Okay, so the question is, how can you support, tips for supporting a significant other that has been through an abusive relationship and they're now out. So they were the victim. Okay, so listen if they need to talk, and don't pressure them if they don't want to talk about it. And so just offering support that you can be there. Know that they will have triggers. And so things that seem so benign and like, why does that bother you? It could be something from a past relationship that is triggering to them that you aren't doing or saying on purpose, but they get a big you get a big reaction because of it. They may not even know it's a trigger. And so you can ask the question, and they might not have an answer, but like, why is that, not accusatory, like, why does that bother you? But like, okay, I see that you had a reaction to that, something I said or did or whatever. Can you explain to me, like, what are you feeling? Why was that such, why did that bother you so much? Why did that, get some type of reaction? Things like that. But what I would suggest is for both of you to get on the hotline.org, and it has so much information in there, or loveisrespect.org is another one. And just because if your significant other is not self-aware, then they don't even know why something triggered them or why they reacted the way they did. And so just offering the opportunity to self-educate yourself, and if they're open to it, to share that information with them about it. But, you know, I always, when I was teaching, I always had this big thing in my wall that says, you know, knowledge is power. And knowledge is power, but knowledge is not power unless it's put into action and applied. So get the knowledge, go to thehotline.org, go to loveisrespect.org and get the knowledge, but then also apply it, because that is where the power, that's where you get your power and control back, is applying that knowledge. You must.
What should we be looking for? Is that bruises or scrapes or like probably makeup application?
Yeah, so, you know, bruising, or in bruises that they try to explain away, or, you know, how many times have they fallen, you know, or ran into the door, you know, whatever, like, time after time, they always have, like, bruises on them, and they have, like, oh, well, I fell down the steps, again, clumsy me, you know, I'm so clumsy. So bruising, you know, things around, you know, their neck and ears, because, you know, strangulation is a big one. And then, but more of what you're going to be listening for is kind of those, just really talking about, maybe sharing stories about them being extremely jealous, them talking down to them, calling them names, being demeaning, those types of things. Not to say that physical violence isn't, you know, pervasive, but most of what happens is verbal, emotional abuse, and that is why we don't think of it as a big a deal. Like, well, that's just the way people talk. No, not in healthy relationships. It's not how people talk. So you're going to be listening. Definitely look, but you're going to be listening more than anything. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Should we ask probing questions or no? Like,
I would say that would be very dependent upon the extent of your relationship. The guy that did my hair, he started doing my hair when I was in 8th grade. And I went to him until he died. And I grew up with him. Like, he watched me grow up. And so we had a very close relationship, and we traveled together. I sang at his wedding, you know, things like that. So yeah, that would be appropriate for him to, and he did express concerns to me about my relationship. He's like, I don't like the way he talks to you, you know. So that would be appropriate. Someone who's just been in your chair, you know, twice. So you definitely have to weigh, like, the extent of the relationship, for sure. Yeah. You bet. Go. If they're what? That is extremely difficult to tell in the beginning. Because in the beginning, you know, you go, oh, look, you know, all the feels, you know, everything's all warm and fuzzy. So it is extremely difficult in the very beginning. So at first, you may not necessarily be able to tell. It's one of those things that time will tell. And but here's the thing that you have to know about this, is that, so in the beginning with the love bombing and everything is wonderful and beautiful and all of this stuff, you're getting very emotionally involved and emotionally attached to this person. So then, when these things start popping up, you start making excuses and, you know, excusing it away. So I don't have time to go into all of this here, but that is where knowing what your boundaries are in a relationship. So I'm doing a workshop at Ivy Tech, October 26th. It's free to the public. It's at noon on October 26th at Ivy Tech if you want to come. But it's very difficult to recognize red flags and warning signs if you don't know what your boundaries in a relationship are. So what I would suggest to you and I'll go over it really quickly. Boundaries, how you know what your boundaries are what are your core morals, values, and beliefs. Who are you outside of any other influence? Just you. If you're alone on a desert island, and you have to establish what is appropriate on this island, what are your core morals, values, and beliefs? And according to that, what are you willing to accept in a relationship? What are you not willing to accept? What are you willing to negotiate? And what are your deal breakers? So that if you're solid and you know what all of that is, then whenever things start popping up, you are like, red flag, and you're not disillusioned by the honeymoon of it. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. So work on what your boundaries are, and then you'll be able to detach yourself somewhat from the relationship and be able to recognize those red flags and warning signs. How are we doing on time? Good. Okay. So if you would like to know more, or if you want to get in contact with me, you can find me anywhere as Coach Carla Webb. Coach Carla Webb. So CoachCarlaWebb@gmail.com. You can send me an email. CoachCarlaWebb.com is my website. On all social media, I'm Coach Carla Webb. I am doing a workshop on healthy boundaries at Ivy Tech on October 26th. It is free and open to the public. And I do have some cards. On that card, the printer messed up, and so my QR code looks like a microchip. But it does, if you finagle it, it will still work. And if you get that QR code, you can download my Is This Healthy relationship checklist. And it's a checklist as to, is this healthy or not? So, I'm Coach Carla. Reach out to me. I've got a podcast called If You Only Knew. I'm on all of the podcast sites too. So get in contact with me. I'm happy to ask or answer any of your questions. So that's all I got.